Hello and welcome everybody who's attending. We are back again with, I guess, the safest sign that Christmas is approaching, and that is the annual presentation of Deloitte's research and report, Digital Consumer Trends. My name is Jonas Malmlund. I'm the lead partner for TMT in the Nordics, that is the industry, telecoms, media and technology. And as usual, I have my colleague, our global director of research in TMT, Duncan Stewart, with me to present the results and the key takeaways from the report. I think Duncan will also give a bit of a sneak peek in some of the forthcoming reports. Duncan, I let you introduce yourself, please.
Hi, everybody. Jonas, thank you very much. Yes, I think this is my third or fourth year co-hosting this. Just so you understand a little bit of like why is this non-Scandinavian guy on the call? For those of you who haven't been on before, yes, I have a role in global research, in Canadian research, in US research, but I also helped do some of the analysis and writing on this Scandinavian cut of the digital consumer trend. So that's reason one why I'm here. Reason two is that I also am co-author of a report called Deloitte TMT Predictions 2023. This report actually launched yesterday, and I'll be able to bring in some of the global Deloitte predictions and connect them to this Scandinavian cut of the digital consumer trends. Couple of things I want to remind you about that as we're going along. We'll have stuff from DCT, which Jonas is going to talk about in a second. We have stuff from predictions, but let's make this fun. Let's make this interactive. Ask questions as we go in the chat. Both Jonas and I will be monitoring that chat window even as we're presenting. So I'll look forward to a dynamic and engaging presentation. Hang on, making sure my slides advance here. Here we go. And there we go. Over to Jonas for the agenda.
Good, thank you, Duncan. And just before diving into the content of the report, just a few housekeeping items. Duncan mentioned one, kind of ask your questions in the chat. We'll take them as we go along, and there will be a bit of time, hopefully at the end of the session as well. Tomorrow, you will all receive an email with a link to the report, with the contact details for Duncan, myself, and my Nordic colleagues, Joachim in Norway and Fredrik in Denmark. We will also have a link or a recorded session or recorded version of this session in case you want to come back to it. So what we will cover today is the 5 kind of key areas of this year's report. So we will look at the device trends in the Scandinavian market. We will look at the video and streaming trends also in the market and see how that's developed after the COVID and the changes we saw during COVID. We will look at the second-hand market for smartphones and the developments there and some key trends and takeaways we see and potential developments going forward in that area. We look at the gaming and gamers market also in Scandinavia, obviously then. And finally, we look at the Scandinavians' attitudes towards privacy, health data, and the use of health monitoring devices. And then, as said, we will wrap up with a Q&A at the end. Good. If you can take the next slide there. Thank you. So just a few words about the research. Duncan mentioned a few things, but it is not only a Scandinavian piece of research. This is a global piece of research we do. We have more than 20 countries. I think it's actually 21 countries participating this year. In total, it's 35,000 respondents, which is a lot in these 21 countries then. We've also done this over the last a number of years, which means that we have historical data and we can compare trends on in different areas year on year, which always is very helpful and interesting. The Scandinavian cut then is Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. We have 2,000 respondents for Sweden and 1,000 each for Norway and Denmark. And the brunt of the research was done in July this year. So it's very recent data. And I guess that is it. Anything you would like to add, Duncan, to that?
Yes. As some of you may know, I have a wife, which is not unusual, and an extraordinarily large dog, and they're due back from their walk any minute now. So if at some point you see a 4,000-pound dog leaping across the screen, you know why. But brace yourselves, Grace is an extremely large animal. Okay, let's get going.
Without further ado, please.
Well, unless the dog comes up.
And I'm sure I'll get a few curveballs coming at me.
I've been known to do that. I throw it over to because we don't rehearse this in terms of the questions. I sometimes just go, hey, I just came up with a really hard question. Let's ask Jonas live on camera and see if he knows the answer. Okay, so smartphone usage still rising. Let's break that down. So what we've done here is 94% of people in Scandinavia own or have access to a phone. That's been flat. Around the world, that's the trend we see in developed markets, 95% of people. Not a lot of differences by age. There used to be. It used to be young people had them and old people didn't. Almost all of that is gone. Now, I'll be talking more about that in a second, about some new kinds of phones, but let's leave that for a minute. What we're looking at here is one of my favorite things from DCT around the world is where we ask people the question of not just do you have a phone, but what are you using your phone for and what do you prefer it for? So let's kind of take a look at some of these. So social media, not a big surprise up. Checking bank balance. This is a significant difference. In many other countries, it would not be in the 70s, maybe the 50s, sometimes even the 40s. Scandinavia is probably among the world leaders in the use of smartphones for banking. Now, you will notice here as we go down, online search fairly high. That's new. Historically, people did search on laptops and desktops. That has shifted. For the first time ever, more than half of search is being done on smartphones. You'll notice we've got sort of slightly out of order here. Browsing shopping websites has sort of jumped up to 48. That is a real shift. You can see that as recently as 2019 pre-pandemic, that was 30%. It is up by more than half in a remarkably short period of time. That's an incredibly important shift. There's actually a prediction I didn't even include on this list. Jonas, when I get there, remind me. Social. Remember, we talked about it on the webinar today. Social commerce. I should probably mention that because of that rise in online purchases, 44%. Massive number. That's almost a shock to me. Quickly, let's take a look at the bottom. When it comes to streaming and TV programs and live TV, people are not, by and large, using their phones in Scandinavia, which to me raises the question of, well, what are they using? Aha! When we see here, we can certainly see that for some online activities, you can see that the computer is in there. We're seeing some nice usage there. I certainly, the one that jumps out at me, I have to keep moving the images of people here so I can read all the slides. But when it comes to making online purchases, although the smartphone is now in the lead, first time ever, interesting, keep an eye on that laptop. This is something, Jonas, you and I have talked about for years. Do I, as a retailer, want to be mobile friendly? Yes. Do I want maybe to be mobile first? Yes. Do I want to be mobile only? Probably not. When it comes to making online purchases, within the margin of error of our survey, 44 and 42, although the smartphone is technically in the lead, basically the two devices are tied with each other. Now, that's a lot of online behaviors, including gaming, but let's take a look at the big screen. Preferred device for TV and streaming remains the big set. Completely dominant at live TV, still 62% for catch-up TV and streaming films and TV series. Don't get me wrong, people are using tablets and smartphones and their computer screens. But certainly one thing I would point out here, as is true in other countries and has been true for years, it's really about screen size. People love their smartphones, but let's face it, even a relatively large smartphone isn't as big a screen as a laptop computer. So a lot of viewing still going there. Jonas, any comments on this so far?
No, I think, I mean, it's surprising that the television part is still up at the levels they are. You would think otherwise, but it keeps its position as kind of the number one screen for watching TV.
Yeah, the thing that I'm gonna flag here, telecom angle. If I am a telecom provider, wireline, wireless, fiber optic, 5G, doesn't matter. The fact that people still are watching so much of this stuff on the really big screen means there's a lot of drive for data. People are perfectly welcome to watch a fairly low res thing on a 5 or 6 inch smartphone. But when you start getting to computer screens, desktop monitors, and especially, 150 centimeter big screens, that's when they're watching the 1080p, the 2160, the 4K, and over time the 8K video content. That's got a lot of implications for telcos. Demand for bandwidth, as long as people keep watching on the giant screen, demand for bandwidth is going to be high, and you also need to build resilient telecom networks with lots of edge capability. You have to be caching this video. If anybody's been trying to watch the World Cup on streaming, you know that there are network challenges with high resolution video and live, and this is an ongoing challenge for our telecommunications networks in Scandinavia and around the world. News. This matters. This matters a lot. We've got elections in North America, in Europe. I think in Sweden, you just had an election earlier this year, right? Where do people, especially by age, get their news? This is, I find this really interesting compared to some other countries. TV news still the number one, well ahead of social media. News websites also very important. Magazines, newspapers, less important. Podcasts, surprisingly, not actually a really big part of news. You read the media, you think everybody's listening to podcasts. They are, but it's not nearly as dominant. Now, that said, and everybody on the call is, Duncan, is there a demographic angle to this? And the answer is, oh boy, is there ever. TV news, important for the population as a whole, but almost irrelevant for 18 to 24-year-olds and only to a slightly higher extent, 25, 34. In those cases, certainly for the 18 to 24s, you can see that TV news is a distant third. News websites are far more important, and social media is actually the number one source. Jonas, my own take on this is looking at 18 to 24-year-olds. If social media is their number one source for news, I think we're all doomed. Is that a fair conclusion, do you think? No, I'm kidding, but it's certainly something to keep an eye on, right?
Yeah.
One that I thought was interesting here, now this is maybe a little bit lagging, but certainly when you look at preferred social media platform for staying updated on news, in Scandinavia, Twitter and TikTok are probably less important than they would be in many other world markets. So obviously, I would say that 71% Facebook and 43% Instagram would be much higher in Scandinavia than it would be in other regions.
Just a comment there. I think it'll be interesting to see the development on TikTok, because it kind of, in the younger generations, it is the platform, it seems. So what will happen over time, it'll be very interesting to watch it.
Yes, here, can everybody see my dog? There we go. There goes the dog. Yes, I would agree. TikTok is absolutely the one to watch for generational angles, 100%. Now, here's a prediction that we launched yesterday, and this is about the 5G smartphone at $99. Well, we are predicting that for the first time ever, we'll be able to bring the bill of materials down and get that price point. Not probably a big deal for most adults in Scandinavia, But if you're buying a phone for your kid, if you've got an 11 or 12-year-old and you're buying a 5G phone, you don't want to be spending $1,000 on it. So these cheap phones are a relatively big deal around the world. We are predicting that very close to 100 million of these will sell over time, mainly in developing world, not Scandinavia, but it is something to keep your eye on. It's also a really interesting trend globally in terms of bringing 5G to those who up until now have not been participating. So just wanted to flag that there are these predictions out here talking about these. Let's keep going. Let's talk about video. We talked about big screens. We talked about the growth there. 81% of Scandinavians have access to at least one video on demand service. That is a remarkable 13 percentage point jump in a single year. However, traditional TV, Jonas, you and I have been talking for, it must be a decade now. How many times have I said TV's not dead? TV is not dead. I keep saying it. I say it every year. One of these days I'll be
every
wrong.
Time we talk, I think.
Every time, every single time. So here's the green arrows or wedges or whatever the heck those are. The green things are 2021 data. Yellow is this year, 2022 data. What we're looking, what are things that you do daily? So we see streaming films, TV series on a daily basis, up 5 points. That's a 20% jump. Watching TV programs on catch-up, up a couple points. But remarkably, watching linear TV, or Flow TV, as I think they call it in Denmark, up a solid 3 points. This is a big deal. I'm yelling and hollering over here because in many other markets, we saw a pandemic blip in traditional live linear Flow TV, but it's dropped in 2022. That has not happened so far in Scandinavia. I actually don't know why. Jonas, any theories?
No, not really. I think it continues post-COVID. That's clearly so. So there hasn't been any dip, and the reasons, I don't know. It's a good question. I think we've got on the streaming side, there is a lot of content. There's many players in the Nordic market, which kind of drives kind of the content side in the market, obviously, and I guess that has an effect.
Absolutely. But in terms of the blip in linear Flow live TV, really interesting to see. But I am glad I was able to throw a live question at you that you didn't know the answer to it. It continues that tradition of many years now where I do that for you too.
Yeah, I'm nervous a week before these exercises or sessions.
So now, as you might expect, there are some age effects. But hold on a second. Obviously, young people are more streaming, older people are more linear. But based in our survey, daily usage of linear/Flow TV, even for 18 to 24, 25, 34, 35, 44, it's up a little. So it's this bounce back, this thing we saw post-COVID where live TV, linear TV is not going away. There is a persistent effect, lower, obviously, for 18 to 24-year-olds, 10%, 12% lower than older people. But nonetheless, everybody, every single age group we look at sees a bump. And meanwhile, when we take a look at streaming, once again, everything is up. We are as interested in video, whether it's linear or streaming, as ever before, and it persists. Let's take a deeper dive on that. We are seeing, this is the number I talked in the beginning, 68 to 81. That's very high, much higher than actually in many other regions. We are seeing this as well, growth in the average number of SVOD services per. Sweden is not in this figure, I should flag, but nonetheless, I would expect it to be following the same trend. Number of services is up. That seems a remarkable thing. Is it sustainable? Now, I've got some data later on that I'll be talking to, global data, but what we are seeing, and I'll get to this in a minute, is churn. But before we get there, let's talk about who are the leaders. This is fascinating. This is very different. The Scandinavian market is not the same as the U.S. It is not the same as most of Western Europe. The dominance of Netflix is, of course, something that is fairly common. But the Tuplay, Viaplay, there are a number of Scandinavian dominant players that are much more important in your market than we would see in other markets. So I did want to flag that. I think my lesson is in the media space. Sometimes Scandinavia can be very similar to North America and Western Europe, but there are still times and places where it's unique. And I think that's an important thing in terms of thinking about it as it's a separate market many of the times. Yes, we can see here, this is broken down by year. You can see the Netflix growth, year-over-year growth for almost all of these. Prime Video would be much lower, by the way, in Scandinavia than in North America or France or Germany, for example. Those numbers in Canada, if I recall, for Prime Video are 30, 40%, not 9. So much, much, much higher. Apple would be a much higher number, I believe, in many other markets as well. Now, I talked about churn. This is something we are seeing, but lower here. About 25% said they'd canceled the service in the last 12 months. In the U.S., Jonas, that number's 37. Canada's 35, UK 34, 35. So churn, but lower in Scandinavia, but big age effect here for cancellation. That's the green line, 36, 35. More than a third of 18 to 34-year-olds in Scandinavia have canceled a service in the last year. What are they canceling? Different brands have different levels of churn. This is not about have actually churned. This is about people who are thinking or considering, so they've already considered or would consider canceling in the future. You can see that a number of these are significantly at risk. Certainly Apple Prime, they had smaller bases, but wow, those are some potentially concerning numbers. Meanwhile, the Netflix number, we'll have to see. I'll talk about this in a minute. Why are they canceling? Obviously, if you don't use it, that's a big factor. But then let's start adding things together. Subscription too expensive, 24%. I spend too much money on my subscriptions, 20%. I need to spend less to account for rising. In an era of rising energy prices and overall inflation and higher interest rates, people are starting to look at, do I need 3, 4, 5 of these services when I need to cut back on spending? Adding them all up, more than half of people who are churning, who are canceling, more than half mention price. Why am I telling you that? Because price is something that streamers can actually play around with a little. Now, there's 3 broad models here. Model 1, and the one that we all kind of got started on, is that I will subscribe to a service. I will pay money, 10, 15 US dollars or so, and in exchange for that, I get to watch what I want when I want. Point 1, streaming, video on demand. 2, I don't have to watch any ads. But if you think about it, those 2 things don't actually have to go together. I can give you what you want when you want. You can binge, you can delay, you can watch it a month from now or a year from now, anything you want. That's video on demand. But whether there's ads or not isn't inextricably connected with video on demand. I can have ads if I want. So, a bunch of different models here. I can give you no ads and you pay a lot of money, option 1. I can give you no money at all and lots of ads. That's called free ad-supported TV, or FAST. Or we can do the hybrid model where I give you like a half-price subscription and maybe about 5 minutes of ads per hour. Now, when we take a look at the models here, we've also got where the ads appear, which is, I think, not a terribly important question, actually. But the really big thing here, and this is so different Jonas, the numbers in North America are completely different from this. So in one way, they're not. I'm willing to pay full price with no ads. 40% in Scandinavia. That's about right. It's about 40% in the UK, 40% in the States, 37% in Canada. Germany was 37, 41, something like that. Then we've got the one where it's a no-cost subscription in exchange for 10 minutes of ads. That's the fast model. We're seeing that rolling out around the world. That's much lower in Scandinavia. That number in other countries is 30, 35, even 40%. So that's the one I'd flag. So if I'm looking at the Scandinavian market, I expect to see a higher than global level of people willing to pay full price for no ads. I am also expecting to see a lower than global number for fast. Doesn't look to me like fast is a big thing. In a term I invented actually a few years ago, I think people in Scandinavia are more ad-allergic. Get it? Allergic to ads? Okay. Jonas is not laughing. Anyway, I think that what we're seeing there is that ad tolerance in Scandinavia is a little lower. Any comments on that, Jonas?
I think it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see kind of what schemes the streaming companies put together in terms of pricing is one. You would imagine that they will look at loyalty schemes of different kinds coming in here as well, and it's a highly competitive market, the Scandinavian one. So any kind of bright ideas would probably be launched here quite early in comparison to other markets.
I would think so. But one thing is that I should mention, some people freak out. They're like, oh my gosh, I don't want to be forced to watch ads. We are not predicting that happens. We believe that the major players will continue to offer that ad-free option. So if you want to save money and watch some ads, you can. But if you don't want to and you're willing to pay the premium, as far as we can tell, nobody's planning on getting rid of that ad-free version. And that's important. That's an important thing. So what's going on? Let's give you some global context. What's going on in the US? Oh my goodness. The number of people who are canceling their premium SVOD service is going up every single quarter. We set a new record in the quarter just ended. That's ended September 30th. So this is very, very fresh data. This was published, what day is today? Thursday? This was published on Monday. So lots of stuff going on here, lots of cancellations. Market's still growing. Net, the subs are slightly higher than the cancels, but it's still, churn is a rising thing. Here is a lovely, lovely chart. This is aggregated across, you can see the major players: Apple, Discovery, Disney, HBO, Hulu, Netflix, Paramount, Peacock, Showtime, and Stars. This is US only. This is not global. But what we are seeing is, back in pre-pandemic, monthly churn was just about 3%. It is now just about 6%. Now, Jonas, you and I we've spent a lot of time talking to telcos over the years, right? When we talk about like churn, 6% monthly is a pretty remarkable number. In terms of that over a period of time really adds up. So what's our prediction? We are predicting that everybody around the world, all of the major players, will in fact be offering an ad-supported video on demand tier. Here's the data you can see. This is the splits I was talking about, 38, 39, 41. As you can see, those numbers for fast down there at the bottom, 41, 44, 55 in Japan. Remember I'll go back here. Where were we on that number? Just as a refresher, the fast model was 16% in Scandinavia, and in other countries, it's much double or even higher. So that's a real shift. So this is one of our predictions, but we're also talking about live sports. This is, Jonas, you were talking about how the streaming companies are going to be more and more aggressive, not just on price. One of the things they are going to be offering is going to be live sports. That's going to be all kinds of sports, a lot of football, some cricket, maybe hockey. That depends. We expect to see basketball could be a big thing. We'll have to see, but a lot going on there. We're predicting that streamers will spend $6 billion on major sports rights. That's big in a way. That number would have been zero just a few years ago. On the other hand, around the world, all broadcasters, including streamers, spend more than 60 billion on rights annually. So at that level, it's only about 10% of the total market is being spent by the streamers.
Hey, one question to you there, Duncan. What do you think will happen with the kind of pricing for premium sports contents? Because that has been one of the content types that has been kept for kind of broadcasting the premium sports content, and
So
kind of
that's a
now
great
it's
question.
distributed more widely.
Yeah. So for a long period of time, about 5 or 10 years, sports rights were going up 10, 20, 30, 40% every single year. That happened kind of 2015 to 2020, 2021. In the last year or two, we have actually seen, so this is not just streamers, Jonas, this is everybody, right? People who buy sports rights used to spend like crazy people. Every year they would spend almost anything to get the rights. No discipline at all, bidding higher and higher and higher every year. In the last 1 or 2 years, there's been a bit of a shift. There has been some greater signs of restraint and rationality. So I would expect that the cost to the consumer of live sports isn't going to go down. But I also wouldn't expect it to double every few years. It does look as though, even though there are new entrants with deep pockets, they are not driving the overall price up as much as we saw in the 2010 to 2020 period. Now, lots of players getting into this. It's the streamers, but it's also regional sports networks. It's technology companies like Amazon, Apple. Those aren't necessarily streamers. Entertainment companies getting into it. There are multiple new entrants getting into this space. Now,
should we encourage people to post your questions? I think we have.
I was just about to say, I haven't seen any questions. Come on, where's the questions? Please do feel free to type your questions into the chat window, and we would love to answer them. Trust me on this, otherwise my voice goes out. So I need a little bit. No, I'm fine. Although this is my second webinar today. So what's going on with secondhand smartphones? In Scandinavia, almost all, 88% of phones are bought new. 88%. Interestingly, there is a significant variation in this around the world. It's always in kind of the 85 to 95 kind of range. And Scandinavia is sort of in the middle of that. But you can see that in some countries, it's a little bit lower. There is some room for Scandinavian consumers to be better for the planet, because almost all of the carbon footprint of our phones actually comes from the manufacturing in that first year. They don't use that much electricity. They're pretty reliable, pretty efficient devices. I mean, you got to plug them in, but they don't use that much electricity. So if we could reduce our consumption of brand new phones and recycle them better, it would be good for the planet. And by and large, that really isn't happening. Now, one of the things that is interesting is that our consumers are saying that, Scandinavian consumers are saying they thought a new phone would have a longer lifespan. They worry that a used or refurbished phone would not be as reliable. You can see that there's a lot of different reasons why people are doing this, but an awful lot of them are picking this for reasons of shiny new phone is better than an old one, right? That at the end of the day, that's it. But in good news, and this is important, this is really important, between 2018 and 2022, when we, because you got to blend this, you got to weight all the different numbers, right? But you can see the percentage of people who are keeping their phones longer, i.e. more than 2.5 years, has doubled from 14% to 29%, more than doubled. So the average has gone up in a 4-year period from about a 1.5-year-old phone to a 2-year-old phone. So that's an encouraging sign and good for the planet. Okay, I see we've got a question in the chat. Do you have any data on churn development, reasons for cancellation, WIP, work in progress? I don't know what WIP means in that context for podcast services. That's an interesting thing to ask. Thank you very much for asking that question from Frida. Well, willingness to pay. Ha! I hadn't seen that. I have enough of an accounting background that WIP means something else different for me. Yes. So what are we seeing in terms of podcast as opposed to subscription video on demand? So I don't have data for Scandinavia. So Jonas, stand by. Maybe you have information there that I don't. But I will tell you that we have data from 2021, obviously. So during the podcast, people, this is more North American data, but I suspect this could be true globally. What we saw is people, more and more people listen to podcasts. And more people, so the percentage who listen to a podcast monthly, weekly, daily rose during the pandemic, okay? That trend has not broken. We have not seen people, by and large, who listen to podcasts at all go away and stop listening. So the podcast bug has persisted. However, when you look at the estimate, either things like the number of minutes or hours per day that people are listening to podcasts, or a statistic like the percentage who listen daily as opposed to weekly or as opposed to monthly. In the US, we have seen some declines in 2022. Podcasting in terms of not the percentage, not in terms of reach, but in terms of usage seems to be falling by about 10 to 20% in at least some markets. So I would definitely flag that as something to watch. Willingness to pay, I have seen no good data on that. Monetizing podcasts remains a terribly difficult challenge. It's not actually unlike esports. Huge numbers of people are there, wonderful demographics, but turning that into money and especially profitability remains a challenge, both for podcasting and esports. Interesting markets, lots of people, great age, lots of young people, wonderful demographic characteristics, but the monetization challenge for both is very bad. Jonas, any Scandinavian specific commentary on that?
Not really. I mean, it's a strong market in Scandinavia as well. But as you say, I think it is a very tricky area to monetize on in there. And assumingly, if you would start monetizing in a better way, you probably drive up the churn.
Oh, yeah, or reduce your, oh, yeah. I mean, there's been a lot of people out there have gone, I have a podcast and I've got 10 million listeners. I would like you to pay $1 a month, and 10 million goes to 1 million pretty fast. Like there's the willingness to pay does not look good. I got to be blunt. I see a question from EA. I'm assuming it's not the gaming company. Scandinavian consumers use their phones for many purposes. Hang on. I lost that here. Here we go. Could the trend also impact their work behavior, i.e. prefer their mobile version to desktop version to perform work tasks? EA, thank you for that question. Jonas, we asked this question a year ago or 2 years ago, and we discontinued asking it because around the world, including in Scandinavia, most people don't use their don't use their smartphones for work-related tasks as much as you might think. Oh, sure, for email, maybe filling out your expense form, travel stuff, video Zoom meetings, stuff like that. But by and large, for things like PowerPoint presentations or word processing documents or spreadsheets, many work tools, not so much the collaborative ones, but many work tools are still computer-based. Relatively few people in our surveys, and we asked this question 2 or 3 years, the percentage was low and it was not rising. So that actually is not a very big thing. Great question. Love the question. We thought it was a good question. That's why we asked it in our surveys, but we stopped asking it because the interest just wasn't there. Now, Marcus Look has a question for us. How do you see LinkedIn rising in terms of a source for news, given that minutes spent on it are high as working professionals use it daily? I would imagine it's an interesting market area for companies, i.e. VCs utilize it highly. Marcus, fascinating question. We don't, in our survey, have granular enough data to pick out LinkedIn as a news source. We do talk about social media as a news source, and it is rising. Some of that could well be LinkedIn. Obviously, as Deloitte, we can't comment on any given platform, but I will anecdotally say my wife, who was here a minute ago, Barbara, actually uses LinkedIn for news a fair bit. It's surprising. So just anecdotally, I think there's something there. Maybe that's something we could explore in more depth in a future DCT. Jonas, let's ask you a personal question. Do you use LinkedIn as a source of news, or do you just use it to keep in track of connections?
Remember, I'm in a certain age bracket and so forth, so I keep it for contacts for sure. I'm not in the news yet there.
Okay, well, but Barbara's older than you are, so it's not always the age effect. So there you go.
No, maybe not.
Okay, so thank you so much for the people who've been asking questions. We love that. Helps make it interactive. I'm going to move on and talk about Chapter 4. No such thing as a typical gamer. 2 out of 3 people in Scandinavia are playing digital games, typically on their smartphones. Now, it's more complicated than that, so let's do a bit of a deeper dive. First of all, love this chart. Let's just worship this chart here on the right for a second here. When it comes to activities you do on your devices, across all devices, this is across all 3 countries in Scandinavia. We asked a question about play games daily. Did you know that the average gamer is more likely to be a woman than a man? And this is a large and statistically significant difference across the 4,000 respondents in these countries. I really want to push hard on that. There is such a cliche out there that gaming is a thing that only men, specifically young men, do. It is not true. It hasn't been true for years. Stop it. Stop doing that. There are more and more women consuming games, playing games, designing games. There is a shift within the gaming industry to be more diverse and inclusive, and that includes women and female perspectives. I could spend an hour talking about just this one point. Really, really important. Just can't stress that enough. However, let's take a look at the age one. Okay, so I'm moving my bar around here. So gaming in general, you can see there's an age effect, but 40% of 65, 75-year-olds are still playing games at all. Now, daily gaming, a little lower, but still 25% higher for 18 to 24-year-olds. No surprise there. There is an age effect, but I really want to hammer home the point. It's not just young people under the age of 34 who play games. Both the overall gaming and the daily gaming, especially for that 35 to 54-year-old group, 35% playing games daily. That is up from 2021. And gaming in general for those demographics, 60, 70%. Even people my very advanced age of 55 to 64, more than half of us are still playing games. So really big market, growing market. We've got a prediction on this I'll be talking to in a second. Not surprisingly, the smartphone is the most used device. Big gender difference on this one. 66% of women play smartphone games versus only 47. That's a 20-point gap. Absolutely statistically significant. Write that one down. Meanwhile, gaming consoles, it's almost 20 points the other way around. So there are, same with desktop computers. So when it comes to the desktop games, the gaming consoles definitely lean men. Smartphone games definitely lean female. Interesting thing here, VR headsets, I'll be talking more about this in a minute, but I do want to flag usage very, very low, even for gaming. We'll talk more about that in a second. Casual games very much up there in the lead. Now, some of these charts here, I made a joke to Jonas when we were going through our dry run on this. we're not sure. Maybe we should do a poll next one. Which do you think is a more confusing and uglier chart, the one in the middle or the one on the right? Because they're both pretty bad. But they're on this screen because they're interesting and they're useful. You can certainly see that females, big interest in casual and puzzle gaming, relatively higher interest in card games and word games. Meanwhile, action, adventure, and strategy lean male. So some nice. There's tons of data here. Reach out to Jonas. Reach out to our leaders in Norway. Joachim, I always pronounce his name wrong, and my friend Frederick in Denmark. We have folks who would be delighted to do a deeper dive on these results. There's a dozen charts I didn't even include in today's slides because we've only got an hour. But trust me on this, there's a ton of great information out there that Deloitte Scandinavia would be delighted to share with you. Now, ugly chart on the right. What we've got going on here is by age rather than gender. There's just a wealth of information here. This is the kind of stuff that if I was, for example, an advertiser who was looking at targeting genders and ages, boy, there's a lot of great data in here. The findings that certainly, you can see jumping out at me that very strong interest. 22% of 65 to 74-year-olds are playing online card games. Meanwhile, 18 to 24, that very strong 28% doing action adventure games. Just a wealth of information here. I think I've got one thing. I see that there's questions in the Q&A. We'll get to those in a second, but I do want to flag, we got a prediction here. As a result of everything I have just spent the last 6-7 minutes talking about, everybody's a gamer, women more likely than men, older people lower than young people, but still 40 to 50 to 60%, 25% of older people gaming daily, all kinds of interesting stuff going on there. Multiple players are buying gaming property. Video streamers are investing in gaming. Netflix has a small thing so far, but they announced yesterday that they are committing to more on gaming. We are seeing telcos get into gaming. We are seeing media companies get into gaming. All kinds of people with intellectual property are getting into gaming. So we are expecting actually a big year for gaming M&A. Okay, before I go to this chapter, I'm going to look at our Q&A. I see 8 questions. Hang on, that's a lot. Okay. Got to scroll up here, scrolling up. LinkedIn, I answered that one. There was a question, follow-up question, legit. If you discontinued asking the question, how do you know that it hasn't changed? This was on the use of smartphones for work tasks. Valid point, EA. I don't know that. It's just a bit of a sense. We do have data at Deloitte on the number of our employees who are using their computers and tablets for work tasks as opposed to those using their smartphones. And internally, the number is not changing all that much. So anecdotal, we've got a bit of a data there. Somebody whose name I'm going to pronounce, Utle Trondore. Great presentation and content. Would love to see the charts with age brackets presented right to left. So, okay, I leave that to my Deloitte colleagues. Please reach out to us. We'd be happy to reformat those for you. Do we have any info data on children's gaming? I actually don't 100% know the answer for this for Scandinavia. Jonas, you might know the answer, but I know that in many countries it is illegal to survey people under 18 using these survey tools. So we don't have data for under 18s. Jonas, do you know the answer to that?
Similar here, we start at 18. I think it is now.
And that's because you're not allowed to survey people younger.
I don't know kind of the legalities behind it, but we start there anyway. We don't have the kids data.
Okay, thanks. And I'm scrolling through. I have a question from actually a Canadian colleague. I have no idea how she got on this call. Hi, Alice. What is the most significant behavioral trend or change that brands should look out for? I think I mentioned this, Jonas. I was going to talk, I don't know if I included it as a slide. the social commerce one. That
Yes.
one, we're estimating as one of our predictions this year, Alice, that about $1 trillion worth of things will be bought under the influence of social media. Now, I don't mean somebody is on Instagram and buys the dress or shoes that they see. That kind of seamless in-app experience is still coming and will happen one day, but we're not there yet. But we think that as part of the customer journey, social media, social influencers, especially for 18 to 34-year-olds. Listen, I'm not going to be buying much because I see something in my social media feed, but my kids will. So that's probably, Alice, one of the big ones I'm seeing. And then I have a question also from Utle. Am I pronouncing that correctly, Jonas? UTLE? UTLE.
Utle, I think it would be then.
Okay, there we go. Do you have data on consuming SVOD on mobile? Yes, lots of people do. We have tons of data on that. It's about 7-8%. One of the other questions that is very important is we ask the question, what is your preferred device for watching streaming video? Big screen. What's your next favorite? Computer. What's your next favorite? Tablet. What's your next favorite? Smartphone. Yeah, but if you're stuck in the passport office for 4 hours, as I was earlier and all you've got is a smartphone, will you watch video on a smartphone? Oh, yeah. My preferred device might be a bigger screen, but I end up watching quite a bit. We do not have the tools to measure the actual number of minutes consumed on mobile devices, but it's almost certainly higher than preferred device data. Great question. Thank you for asking that. Okay. Am I the only one experiencing bad metallic sound? I hope so. That's from Morten. Sorry about that. I hope that's not my end. Let's blame Jonas, okay? Anyway, we've got a couple more slides to go. Let's do those. Actually, I think we've only got one more to go. Scandinavian consumers care about privacy. Well, sort of. When it comes to privacy, it's some fascinating stuff here. So we've got the always and some of the time is the way I would look at it. So 88% accept almost either always or some of the time, and certainly the 26% always accept default cookies. 30% that's down a little bit, which suggests maybe at the margin that people are getting a little more interested. And then if you take a look at the 22 versus 21, the percentage of people who use a web browser that limits ad tracking, that's up a little. So pushing on the data, and I'm not that comfortable. I've been doing survey data for 30 years now. 9% versus 7, that may not be statistically significant, but it might be. Let's take an eye on that. Maybe there's a trend there. Maybe we'll see. Certainly, there seems to be a low focus on privacy, but possibly it's rising just a little bit. That would certainly fit with data that we're seeing in other countries around the world. Tailored ads, when we ask people, this is an interesting trend. 25% of people in Scandinavia said that they wanted tailored ads last year, and that's up 4 points. That's probably significant. It's a 4-point jump on a 25 base that's a 20% gain year over year. Meanwhile, the preference for ads not to be tailored, low, 30%. It's a small difference, but certainly the trend is that the willingness for ads to be tailored maybe is a little creeping up. Why does this matter? So remember I was talking about AVOD? One of the things that's so important about ad-supported video on demand is that the CPMs, the cost per thousand impressions that streamers look like they're going to be able to get for their ads may be even higher than traditional linear or flow TV. CPMs in the US are about $40 per thousand for traditional broadcast. Ballpark. And it looks like for the AVOD versions, those ads are closer to a $50 CPM. Why? Targeting. there is a need for those AVOD services to be able to serve tailored ads because they know who you are because you've logged into your app, right? So this is an important trend to keep an eye on when it comes to the ability of AVOD to monetize that ad base. Now, connected to privacy, we want to talk a little bit about health and health data tracking. So there has been a fairly big year-over-year increase in health tracking, 69% versus 62. That's a big jump. Now that's across all the smartphones, smartwatches, and fitness bands, but that is a bigger trend than I've seen in many other countries. Lots of options there. You can track your number of steps, aka amount of exercise, heartbeat. Not a lot of changes here year over year, but you will notice, this is kind of interesting, things like blood oxygen and VO2 max, fairly small. Maybe I think a lot of people thought that might be a higher thing in post-COVID, but as the pandemic, it's not gone, but as it becomes less of a headline dominant news item, we're certainly seeing that drop off. Now, one of the things I thought, and I'm just gonna, and I'm being a little gendered here, but you'll notice that we asked a new question in 2022. We asked, do you use your health tracker to track menstrual ovulation cycle? 19% of women, obviously doesn't apply to men, but 19% of women report, that's a fifth. Now, that's a really big deal. That's a big growing market, and obviously the privacy implications of that one are much bigger. I mean, how many steps I take is something that men or women are probably less guarded about, but when we take a look at sharing health data with the doctor, you will notice that the percentage of women who disagree about sharing data is significantly higher. I am willing to bet, we didn't do a cross-tab analysis, but I'm willing to bet you right now that that was driven by that menstruation ovulation one. That's going to be an interesting thing to watch. And I'm talking a little bit out of school here, but with U.S. changes in laws on Roe v. Wade and access to contraception and abortion, this is going to be a big global issue. So that's one that I would definitely keep my eye on. Not I think relevant in Scandinavia, but certainly as a global and a U.S. issue, that'll be one. You can see here for women, you can see there's that big jump. I hope you can see my cursor here on screen. 31% of women are concerned that doctor will share personal information. That's obviously something that when we talk about the growth in digital health and health trackers, privacy, really big issue. So I think, here's my contact info. Do we have one for the we don't have one for the Nordic team. Scandinavian team, you'll be shared with that tomorrow. But there's me. Reach out on email. Happy to do that. I'm going to stop sharing now. Jonas, we are basically right on time. I don't see any final questions. Any final comments as we wrap up? Do you want to mention it or should I? Duncan's coming to Scandinavia.
You can mention that then. Okay,
I will be. We've got a launch event in Copenhagen in the first week of February and a launch event in Stockholm. So stay tuned. Duncan's coming to town. Not Santa, not as good as Santa, but I do what I can.
It's February, isn't it, Duncan?
Did I say?
I can't remember, but it's in
first week of February. First week of February.
Yeah. And good. Many thanks, Duncan. Brilliant as always. Super interesting. And as we mentioned when we started, we will send out an email tomorrow with your contact details, mine's, Joachim's, Fredrik's, and so forth, and also links to the report and so forth. So that will come tomorrow. So super good. Many thanks for attending, all of you, and hopefully see you soon. And
thank you
again, Duncan.
Have a great day.
Goodbye.